Hello, everyone. Suzanne Taylor-King here for Unlock Your Way with STK, and I'm super excited to be here today with Kevin Maney. Hello, Kevin. Welcome.
Hi, Suzanne. Nice to be on your show.
Well, thank you so much for being here. And this is one of the rare occasions where I do a show with someone I've never actually had a conversation with before. It's only happened one other time. So but I feel so close to you and what you do and the things you talk about that it was a no-brainer for me when you said yes. So thank you so much for being
Yeah,
here.
awesome.
Um,
Looking forward to it.
well, first of all, you are one of the original gang of category thinkers.
Right.
And this was really intriguing to me. I heard about you through our friend Pablo Gonzalez. That's how I got introduced to this whole community. And this new book that has just come out, your most recent book is Intended Consequences.
That's the most recent one that's come out. Yeah.
Wonderful. Tell us a little bit about what inspired that book, and then we can talk about the ones before that.
Sure. I've had this collaborative writing relationship for what it's been like 8 years now with Hemant Taneja, who's the CEO of General Catalyst. And, he's been one of the most successful VCs of the past decade.
Mm.
And we have just a terrific working relationship. And so we first wrote a book that was called Unscaled. It came out in 2018, I think. And followed that up with one called Healthcare, which took the Unscaled was mostly about basically how AI is going to impact all sorts of different industries. We were a little ahead of the ball game in that one.
Mm-hmm.
And Healthcare was a deeper dive into the healthcare industry itself. And then the third book we published together was this book called Intended Consequences. And basically the core idea was that increasingly, especially now, of course, now it's becoming particularly important with ChatGPT and the generative AI and all this stuff that's happening. There's a lot of conversation about responsible innovation.
Mm-hmm.
And how do you create not only products but actually like build companies that are responsible about the way that they bring innovation to the world. And what Hannah and I were talking about is that everybody's talking about that you need to do that, but nobody's actually written a playbook for, like, if you're a founder or you're a CEO or whatever, and you want to build your company that way. How do you think about that, and what are the steps you can take, and how do you build that into the everyday processes of the way your company works? So Intended Consequences is that playbook. Like, how do you, as a founder, how do you do that?
I resonate with this so much because I just asked a question the other day on social media about buying a course or a coaching program that was generated 100% with AI, from concept to outline to scripts to the videos to all the handouts, that the actual person selling this course didn't have anything to do with its creation. So none of the person's intellectual property was used. It was all generated with AI. And my question was, is that real? Is that something that you should be selling as a person? Is that morally okay to, sell that as your own thing? And it just didn't feel right to me. And I thought this is really what you're talking about here, is that intentional creation of something, but having it come from the person, I don't know. Is that really responsible to be putting that out into the marketplace?
Well, I think there's two different things that get raised here. And so one is, yes, we're having an ongoing conversation right now about intellectual property. I mean, it's a very tangled topic right now, because, for instance, in this person's case, I don't know anything about what you accessed or whatever, but just from what you've told me, if they're building that with AI, that means the AI learned from a lot of other things that other people created that were their
Yes.
intellectual property. So are you actually creating something that's new and it's yours, or are you stealing from a bunch of other people who already created something? I don't know.
Mhm.
I don't think we know the answer. I think the courts are going to be what untangles that answer. But
Yeah.
there's a whole other level when you go back to just what's happened with, for instance, with OpenAI and how fast they've gone, and they've been releasing um, uh, AI into the world without really knowing what it's going to do.
Mm.
And we're starting to create things that are so powerful and can have such an enormous effect on millions or billions of people's lives that there's an irresponsibility to putting those things out into the wild before you have some knowledge of what they can and can't do, some guardrails to make sure that they don't do bad things or create enormous biases or God knows what, influences elections. I mean, things that we don't want these
Yeah.
things to do, right?
Yeah.
And so this is the other conversation that's going on is what's the responsible way to put these powerful technologies out into the world while not slowing down the development of them, because they do have the potential of solving really important problems for us. They also have the potential of doing enormous harm. Heyman and I have talked about that. In some ways, it's not unlike when nuclear fission
Mm.
was discovered, right? And here's this super powerful technology that yes, it can be built into nuclear reactors and power the world in a very clean way, and yet it could also blow up the world.
Mhm.
And after that was created, and there were some crazy ideas, in like the 1950s about like building like jet planes that ran on nuclear, fuel. I mean, and which if it crashed, that would have been a problem.
Yeah.
But we had a conversation around that and created something called, the Nuclear Energy Commission and or Nuclear Regulatory Commission. I'm sorry, to try to put guardrails around that. And that's the same kind of thing we need to do now around what's going on with these technologies.
Yeah. Agreed. Um, well, one of the people in my Facebook group, my community, actually said, "Well, how is if using AI to create something is really from hundreds of other people's intellectual property because it's collecting
Right.
data? How is that different than researching a topic?" Uh, for example, high performance habits, and I research it from 10 different perspectives, take 10 different courses, read 60 different books on it, and then I create my own thing. I've done the same
Oh, I
thing.
know. I know.
But
That's the interesting question, right? It is
yeah,
an interesting question.
it's such a fascinating, like using machine to do that or using me to do that. It's still really the same thing.
Yeah.
And we had a really interesting discussion about
Now,
that, the intention behind that.
now, this is just me speaking, but on a personal level, um, if you look back at our groundbreaking book, Play Bigger, which is what led to category thinkers and category design and all the things that you're excited about,
Mhm.
um, you, you know, we understood that we were standing on the shoulders of giants, and so my belief is that you credit where credit is due.
Yeah.
And so we yes, we built on recent Trout's work. We built on Crossing the Chasm and a lot of other seminal work, and then we took all of those things and then built on top of it. But wherever possible, we credited those people with what how they fed into this, and
Mhm.
that's what I believe. And that's the thing that you're not going to get from the AI. It's just going to regurgitate everything as if it just came out of out of the thin air, and
Right.
you're never going to know where it came from. That's the problem.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, let's talk a little bit about Play Bigger, because that's how I originally your name got on my radar
Mhm.
was that book. Again, another collaborative book. And what intrigues me most, well, the book intrigues me. I loved it. But also this history you have of great collaborations. So I'd love to dig into that a little bit after you tell us about Play Bigger and how it's really influenced category design at a whole new level. a whole new generation of thinkers, I
Well,
believe.
yeah, well, so I just for your background for your audience, like, so I was a journalist and an author and I, still am in some ways and have been for 35 something years. And before Play Bigger, I'd written a number of books. And I had a couple of my co-authors. I wrote the book with three other guys, Chris Lockhead, Al Ramadan, and Dave Peterson. Al, I knew quite well for maybe 20 years or so by the time we even got together. Chris, I'd met. Dave was new to me.
Mm-hmm.
But we had dinner one night in San Francisco, 2014-ish, and got talking about this idea that especially in digital markets, that most categories tend to be a winner take all situation. And just if you kind of like use some backward logic, if that's the case, then why, if you're running a company, why wouldn't you want to do everything you could to increase the odds that you're the one that wins a market category? Because that's where all the economics come from.
Mm-hmm.
And it turns out it's way better to be the winner of a decent sized category than it is to be like the number 5 player in a big category. So then we just kind of started saying, like, well, what if we could we reverse engineer this and create a playbook for how do you think that way? How do you build a company that way, around the idea that it's all about, first of all, seeing out into the marketplace and understanding a category that doesn't exist yet that needs to exist. And then once you do that, how do you define it and put rules around it so that the public out there believes that you're the one that knows this category best, but also puts you sort of in the driver's seat of the category in general. Anybody else who comes in, if you set the expectations of what this category is going to look like, and take like Uber, for example, for instance, Uber created this app with little cars that drive around and everything, right?
Mm-hmm.
They set the expectations for what ride sharing should look like. And every ride sharing company in the world that's ever come up after that has created some version of that expectation. Yeah. So they set the rule. So how do you see that new space? How do you set the rules and define that space? And then over time, do what you need to do to ultimately win that space. And so we started working this through, and that this turned into the book Play Bigger. We actually created the word category design. We were in Chris's kitchen having a conversation one time, and we were talking about how this was really, we were talking about categories all along, but we started talking about the word design and saying this is category. Anyway, category design phrase came up and it stuck.
And did you know it right away when?
Yeah, basically, I think I said it, and Al just basically like pounded the counter and said, "That's it."
Love those moments. That's great.
And then the book came out, and look, I mean, I thought that I was an author and moving on to the next book, and the book came out and just blew up, and resulted in CEOs all over the world calling and saying, "Please help us do what you wrote about." Mm-hmm. And so that's now turned into a full-on startup advisory, CEO advisory business to work on category design.
Amazing. Yeah. I think I want to know a little bit about this writing style of yours that is so action oriented. It's not fluff and theory and just conceptual. It's actual how to do it, how to think about it, how to implement it. And I think that really stands out in today's marketplace of books. I'm an avid reader. And when a book does that for me, it always ends up on the rotation list of books I recommend to people because it's actionable. And so much of what we learn today in social media, we're constantly inputs from news and TV and social media and the scroll, but we don't get the how-to. We don't get the implementation piece. So how did you come up with that style, or like why was that so important to you?
Well, and certainly not every book I've written has been that way. And it's somewhat situational of like, is that what we're doing? Is that what,
Mm.
is called for here? And, in two books in particular, Play Bigger and Intended Consequences, from the beginning, the goal was to write a playbook, to write something
Mm.
that people could take and use and actually, without ever calling us, implement in their companies. And I think that's one of the reasons the book Play Bigger has been so successful. I mean, we hear all the time from, say, some CEO somewhere who, read the book and tried to, and carried that out by themselves. And they just want to tell us like, here's the result of this whole thing that we, did following your
Mhm.
script. And,
Yeah.
that's super satisfying. And actually now, like I'm halfway through what will be the fourth book written with Hemant from General Catalyst. And this one is about basically our 9 principles for impact investing. So,
Wow.
creating companies, changing the mindset of capitalism from profits only to profits plus impact. And
Mm.
how do you create a set of principles to follow to do that? And we're halfway through. So it's another sort of that kind of actionable instruction book when it.
Oh, I'll look forward to that because I'm a big conscious capitalism fan and a B Corp fan and, putting people over profits. So that'll be a great read for me.
Well, and I just want to make one slight adjustment to that, is that in the way that we're arguing this out, it's not putting people over profits. It's actually people and profits.
Mm.
And in this next era, and going back to our early part of because we're creating these super powerful technologies that can do a lot of harm if they get out of bounds, that the companies that are going to, and by the way, whole other generation that's come up that they want to work for companies that do good while they're doing well. And so the companies that follow this kind of playbook are going to be the ones that have enduring success over long periods of time. And so it's actually by doing this, it's not about being, philanthropic and say we're going to give up some profits because we're going to do good stuff. It's that actually we're going to do better.
Mm.
We're going to have more success if we actually operate this way.
Wow. It's a good distinction because, I think being innovative, as far as attracting younger people, younger talent, new talent, you have to again be different. You have to be more than just a place to work.
Yeah, absolutely.
I
Yeah.
love it. I love it. So talk a little bit about this collaboration history you have. I'm a big fan of collaboration, but yours seem to be not only longstanding, more than one endeavor, but also really impactful and really aligned.
Yeah, that's a good question. So the first one was actually a book called The 2-Second Advantage, which came out in 2011. Which was I wish it came out about 10 years later, because it was about the intersection between brain science and computer science and what they were learning from each other. It was a little ahead of the curve on the AI thing.
Mm-hmm.
But I co-authored that with Vivek Ranadive, who at the time was the CEO of TIBCO. He's now the owner of the Sacramento Kings basketball team.
Oh, cool.
Um, but I had not actually done that before. I had written a number of books on my own, and this opportunity came up. We started talking. We had a
Mhm.
very simpatico idea about like what to do, and I really liked it. It was a good economic model for me as an author. It worked really well, but also just having two brains in the room, was turned out to be, you know, it added to the content itself, but it also was a more interesting way to write, because being an author writer can be a very lonely,
Mhm.
isolating business. And then I ended up doing Play Bigger with three other guys, which actually we got turned down by some publishers when we were trying to sell the book, because they thought four people could never write a book together.
Hmm.
And the reason that it came off was the turning point was when we decided that we're going to approach this as a band like U2 would approach
Nice.
creating an album. That it's not four guys writing a book; it's one band writing a book, and
Beautiful.
we needed one sound and one attitude, and when we hit on that, it made it all work. And then these last three, and now into a fourth book with Hemant, again, it's the same kind of thing. It's just been a great process. And with Hemant, it's even more interesting because there's all of General Catalyst behind him. So I'm not just collaborating with him, but I can also draw on a lot of those resources. And and look, the education I get from it. I mean, like I've gotten 5 MBAs out of working with these like unbelievable people
Yeah.
one-on-one. So it's been wonderful for me.
Yeah. Well, and resulted in you having a consulting business that you really didn't set out to have.
Right. Yeah. I got pulled into the consulting business.
Tell us about the first time that happened. What was your thoughts
Well,
on
actually, what happened was Dave, Chris, and when we were doing the book, Dave, Chris, and Al, they already had a startup advisory business,
that?
and I thought the book would be done, and it might help. Again, none of us thought the book was going to like blow up like it did, right? So you thought, okay, it's going to help their advisory business, and it'll help me sell my next book, and we'll go on. When essentially the phones and emails started ringing off the hook for them, they approached me and another guy who's kind of been in their circle for 25 years named Mike Danfus, and said, we can't do all of this. Why don't the two of you guys set up another business and just take some of these incoming calls? So we were like, okay. and yeah, we learned some from the way they were already handling clients, and then we invented some stuff ourselves. And yeah, I'm sure like everybody's experienced out there. The first couple of times we worked on this, we did a couple for free just to try to figure out how to do this, and it's pretty rough at first, until you get your footing. And then we kind of figured it out and have had great success with it, and a lot of really happy clients who we've truly helped figure out what they're all about, why they need to exist in the world, and how to build a market category.
I love it. I love that it was not intentional to have the book turn into a consulting practice. Well done on that.
Thanks.
Now, how about this graphic novel that's in your history?
Well, this was just sort of a little side thing, which was I've had a good friend for a very, very long time named Mark Holmes. When I first met Mark, he worked for National Geographic, and he was a graphic artist and actually ended up running the web operations for National Geographic, and very talented artist. And so I had a good relationship with Cisco in the communications team at Cisco. I had done some writing for them, some work for them. This was after I was kind of out of journalism, daily journalism kind of stuff. And I was talking with them one time about they were struggling to talk about some of the technology things they wanted to talk about in a way that was very very easy to understand, and would capture people in a way that was different and not just like a blog post or something like that. And so I approached Mark about this idea of what if we took one of their topics, and instead of writing like a 1,000-word article about it, instead turn it into essentially a comic book. And Cisco loved the idea. We ended up doing 4 or 5 of these for them about different topics, and it was basically dramatizing something about like cybersecurity or something like that, but actually telling it in this form of a superhero story. And
I love it. I'm going to have my husband look them up, because my husband is a Cisco certified, CCIE guy that works for Dell. So well versed in those topics. And our brains are, I'm creative and he's linear, so might be an interesting conversation for us
Yeah,
to
yeah.
have. I appreciate that. That's great. All
Now,
right.
if I can, so if I can go even farther afield on that
Yeah.
topic, is that uh, I have after 9 nonfiction books published, I'm about to publish a fiction book, a novel,
Oh.
and but there's a bit of a business story behind it, which is that from the late 1980s to the early 1990s, when the Soviet Union was falling apart and that whole Eastern Bloc was falling apart, I was covering that for USA Today. I was making a lot of trips over there. I was a reporter at USA Today, and I was covering the business side of, like, the economic side of it.
Mm.
And it was this crazy, like, once in a history kind of moment when this superpower essentially was falling apart and trying to adopt an entirely new system, and crazy things were happening, and it was chaos and weird stuff like KGB agents starting businesses and like kidnapping people from other businesses and stuff like that. And I was a witness to all of this, and I had all this information and details. And in 1991, before I'd written any nonfiction book, I decided to use that information, that setting, and write a novel. So I wrote a novel about this kind of a funny, quirky thriller about this young American consultant that goes over trying to make thinks he can strike it rich in this unfolding economy of Russia, goes over and gets in the middle of all kinds of trouble between the ex-KGB agents who run businesses, and falls in love with this Russian woman, and all these things that happen, this whole kind of thriller story. And so I wrote this thing, and I didn't, it was new. I'd never written a book. I didn't know what I was doing. I sent it to a couple of editors and never heard back from anybody, and figured, well, this is a fun exercise. I'll just stick it in a Tupperware container and, and put it in a closet. And then a couple of years ago, my oldest kid, my daughter, who was born around the time that I wrote the book, asked me if she could read it. And so I found it in a storage bin and pulled it out, and I told her, like, I think I want to read it first because it might suck and I'd be embarrassed. And look, I'm reading it almost like for the first time. I could barely remember anything from the book. And I start reading it, and I'm going like, this is really good. And so I sent it to her, she's also a journalist and writer and very, very well read. So she gets back to me and says, like, this is terrific, but I have like 2 pages of notes that'll make it better. And
Okay.
and so I re-edited the book with some of her input, sent it around to some other discerning friends who all came back and said, this is really great. So I ended up publishing it and putting it out there, and it's probably it's due to come out later in February, and it's called Red Bottom Line. I'm super excited about it because it actually does combine some of the things that are really important to me. I mean, it is a business economic sort of background story about people who are going through some extraordinary times at that moment in time, but it also allowed me to really get my my creative side out, and invent situations and people and characters. And so it's kind of like this marriage of that graphic novel stuff we were talking about, and the business side of things, and it kind of all came together in this, and I'm very excited about it.
How fun. And how cool was it that your daughter had input for it?
I really appreciate it. I think it was great. In fact, I put an author's note at the beginning of the book that explained a little of what I just told you, but also gave her credit for sort of putting it over the transom.
I love it. I love what she was brave enough to have some notes for you on the book. Congrats to her. All right, last question.
Okay.
So I noticed something in your bio that you're in a band and that it's called Total Blam Blam. And immediately I was like, David Bowie-ish band here? Tell me more.
Yeah, yeah. In fact, here's you see the poster back here by
Yeah,
you probably
yeah.
can't see it. But yeah, no, I've been it for about 10 years. I mean,
Uh-huh.
I've been a musician and songwriter and in bands and stuff for, most of my adult life. And for the past 10 years or so with these guys in New York. And we're big David Bowie fans. So there's a song called Suffragette City that has the line, "She's a total blam blam,"
Uh-huh.
which is what we named the band after. And yeah, we play regularly around New York. I write a lot of our music. We also play some Bowie and Springsteen and Tom Petty and,
Mhm.
things like that too. But
Oh, ever get to Philadelphia?
no, we've never played in Philadelphia.
Okay.
If you know of someplace we should play in Philadelphia, let
I
me know. We'll
do.
come.
I do. I do know of a couple. I worked for Electric Factory concerts for a long time in my
Excellent.
college days. So, yeah, and I'm thinking maybe a special appearance at an event, might be fun.
We would love to do that.
I love it. Well, I'm just absolutely thrilled. I was brave enough to reach out to a stranger and ask them to be on my podcast, and so thankful that you said yes. And I can't wait to read a novel from you. Really, really exciting. I'll look forward to sharing that with my audience as well.
Well,
Uh,
thanks.
how can people get in touch with you?
Well, our firm, the category design firm, is actually called Category Design Advisors. And so there's a website, categorydesignadvisors.com. And I also have a website of mine called just kevinmaney.com. And that site has things like not only the books and articles, but also the music stuff and
Mhm.
all of that. So, you can find me either way.
All right, awesome. Well, thank you again so much for being here today and appreciate it. And appreciate the work that you do.
Well, thanks. And thanks for being a part of Category Thinkers too, because it's a great community. And
It really is.
thanks for contributing to it.
Absolutely. I think community is really where my heart has always been, and finding a community of people who think differently, who think uniquely, and who are brave and who are just willing to be themselves in that way is really just such a gift for me as an entrepreneur. And as I create my own category of coaching, called eudaimonology, I really appreciate what you've created in a really authentic, heart-centered, just thankful way. So, as my son says, TFBY, thanks for being you.
That's great. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, Suzanne,
Again,
take care.
bye.
Bye.